The screech was the first thing, a sound like a giant tearing a sheet of steel, long and agonizing. Then came the impact. Sarah Jenkins's head snapped forward, saved from the dashboard by the airbag that exploded from her steering wheel in a cloud of white, acrid-smelling powder. Her world was a violent, percussive thump. Her ears rang. Her 1999 sedan, a testament to her student loan debt, was shoved sideways into the concrete median. For a second, there was only silence, the kind of heavy, profound quiet that follows a bomb. Then, the screaming started. "God," she whispered, her voice hoarse. She was on the I-395, heading out of D.C. The clock on her cracked dashboard read 7:14 p.m. She was 14 hours into a shift that should have ended at 5. Her scrubs, once a cheerful pediatric blue, felt like sandpaper, and the stale caffeine in her system had long since turned to a dull throb behind her eyes. She was bone-tired. She unbuckled, her hands moving with an automatic, practiced calm. She shoved her door open against the bent fender, the metal groaning in protest. The smell of gasoline and burnt rubber hit her. "I'm a nurse," she said to no one. It was a mantra. It was the thing that switched her from victim to responder. The scene was chaos. Traffic was stopped. People were shouting into phones. Ahead of her, maybe 2 cars up, was the source. A massive dump truck, its front end accordioned, was on its side. It had T-boned a black, official-looking SUV, the kind you see in motorcades. Sarah grabbed her trauma bag from the passenger floorboard. It was an old EMT bag she'd kept stocked since her residency. She ran, her worn sneakers crunching on a carpet of shattered safety glass. "Stay back! Get back!" A man in a suit was yelling, one arm hanging at an odd angle. A dazed-looking Secret Service agent. "I'm an ER nurse," Sarah shouted, not breaking stride. She didn't wait for permission. She reached the SUV. It was on its side. The cabin was dark. She heard a sound, a horrifying, wet, gasping sound. Someone was choking on their own blood. She climbed onto the vehicle's side, pulling at the crumpled door handle. It wouldn't budge. "Help me," she yelled to the dazed agent, who just stared. "Sir, I need your help." He stumbled over. Together, they wrenched the door open. Inside, a woman in a dark blue suit was pinned. Her eyes were wide with terror, her face a mask of blood. She was gasping, her chest heaving, but no air seemed to be going in. Her breath was a high-pitched suck. Sarah didn't recognize her. She just saw the patient. "Ma'am, I'm Sarah. I'm a nurse. I'm going to help you." She checked her airway. Clear. But the patient's trachea was deviating, shifting to the side. Her chest rose on one side, but not the other. Sarah's blood ran cold. Tension pneumothorax. A collapsed lung was pumping air into the chest cavity, and that air had nowhere to go. It was crushing the heart, and the other lung. She was minutes, maybe seconds, from cardiac arrest. "I need an ambulance now!" Sarah screamed at the bystanders. Just as she was about to reach into her bag, she heard it again. The screech. She looked up. A blue sedan, a rubbernecker who hadn't seen the stopped traffic, was hydroplaning on a patch of spilled coolant. It was spinning, coming right for them, right for the open door. There was no time to pull the woman out. There was no time to do anything but act. Sarah didn't think. She just moved. She threw her own body into the car, covering the woman, curling around her head and torso like a human shield. She tucked her head, braced for the metal-on-metal impact. Wham! The blue sedan slammed into the overturned SUV. A side window inches from Sarah's head exploded, showering her back with 1,000,000 tiny, sharp diamonds of glass. A piece of shrapnel from the doorframe tore through the back of her scrub top, slicing a hot, angry line across her shoulder blade. She cried out, but she held her position, shielding the woman beneath her. The car spun off. Silence returned, broken only by Sarah's own ragged breathing and the whimpers of the woman she was protecting. "It's okay," Sarah panted, the adrenaline singing in her veins. "It's okay. You're okay." But she wasn't. The woman's gasping was weaker. Her lips were turning blue. She was dying. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. She scrambled, ignoring the stinging pain in her back. She ripped open her trauma bag. She found what she needed, a 14-gauge angiocath, a long, thick IV needle. The dazed agent saw it. "What are you doing?" Don't touch her." "She's dying," Sarah snapped, her voice an iron command that cut through the chaos. "She has a tension pneumothorax. I have to let the air out or her heart will stop." She didn't wait for his approval. Her training was absolute. She ripped the woman's silk blouse and suit jacket open. She found her landmark. Second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line, right between the ribs. "This is going to hurt, ma'am, but you need to breathe." She positioned the needle. She was a nurse. She did not puncture patients outside a hospital. This was assault. This was the end of her career. She pushed. The needle sank deep. There was a sickening pop as it pierced the pleural lining. And then, the sound. A loud, rushing hiss. It was the sound of 100 pounds of pressure escaping a tiny hole. The woman beneath her didn't scream. She took a breath. A deep, shuddering, beautiful gasp. Her eyes, which had been rolling back, focused. Color flooded her face. Sarah leaned her head against the car frame, shaking so hard she could barely hold the needle in place. She had done it. She had saved her. Only then did the sirens, which had been a dull whine in the distance, finally roar up to the scene. The red and blue lights painted the wreckage. "It's okay," Sarah said, this time to herself. "Help is here." She had no idea how wrong she was. The first responders who arrived weren't the paramedics. It was the police. A man strode through the wreckage like he owned it, his mirrored sunglasses reflecting the flashing lights. His mustache was neatly trimmed, his uniform immaculate. His name tag read, Miller. He exuded an aura of absolute, unquestionable authority. He saw the scene, the overturned SUV, the dazed agent, and Sarah, covered in blood, leaning over the high-profile victim, still holding the long, bloody needle she'd used to stabilize the catheter. "Police! Get your hands off her!" Miller bellowed, his hand dropping to his holster. Sarah flinched, startled. "It's okay, officer. I'm an ER nurse. She had a tension pneumothorax. I just decompressed her chest." "A what?" Miller stalked forward, his eyes narrowed. He didn't see a nurse. He saw a hysterical woman, a bloody weapon, and a victim. "I said step away from her, now!" "But I need to hold the catheter steady until the EMTs get here," Sarah pleaded, her voice frantic. "If it moves, I'm not telling you again." Miller grabbed Sarah's arm, the one not holding the needle, and yanked. Hard. "No!" Sarah cried out. But the motion was enough. She was pulled off balance. She stumbled back, falling onto the wet pavement. Paramedics were just arriving, pushing a gurney. Miller stepped between Sarah and the victim, shielding her as if Sarah were the attacker. "Scene is not secure," he barked at the EMTs. We have a possible assailant. Detain her." "Assailant?" Sarah's mind reeled. I'm the one who saved her. I'm a nurse at St. Jude's, ask them." Miller scoffed, a short, ugly sound. "Yeah, a nurse, huh? Looks to me like you're an attacker who just stabbed this woman in the chest. You're lucky you're not getting shot." He grabbed her wrists, which were scraped raw from the crash. "You have the right to remain silent." "You've got to be kidding me," Sarah whispered, the fight draining out of her. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a cold, sickening dread. "Put your hands behind your back." I just saved her life," Sarah repeated, her voice cracking. The paramedics, people she vaguely recognized from the St. Jude's ambulance bay, were now working on the secretary. They looked at her, then at Miller, then back at their patient. They didn't intervene. They just saw the uniform, the cuffs, the authority. Click, click. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into her skin. Officer Miller hauled her to her feet, his grip bruising. "You are interfering with a federal investigation," he said, enjoying the feel of the words. "I'm a witness," Sarah spat, tears of rage and frustration welling. "I shielded her! Look at my back! Another car hit us!" Miller gave her back a cursory glance. "Looks like you were in a car wreck. So was everyone else. Now, be quiet." He shoved her toward his patrol car. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that covered her entire body. The bystanders were filming. Their phones were out, little red lights glowing in the dusk. They weren't filming the hero. They were filming the attacker, the unstable woman in bloody scrubs being arrested at the scene of a national incident. She watched, horrified, as the paramedics loaded the Secretary of State onto the gurney. The woman, her patient, was conscious. Their eyes met for a fleeting second. Sarah saw confusion, then gratitude. But it was too late. The gurney was moving. The ambulance doors slammed shut. "She needs a chest tube," Sarah called out, a desperate last attempt. "And a broad-spectrum antibiotic. The wound wasn't sterile." "I said be quiet." Miller shoved her into the back of his cruiser. The door slammed, sealing her in. The plastic seat was hard and slick. She sat there, cuffed, bloody, and aching, watching the ambulance pull away, taking her patient and her reputation with it. The precinct was worse. She wasn't arrested. She was detained for questioning. It was a legal gray area that meant she had no rights, no phone call, and no end in sight. They put her in a small, windowless room with a metal table and 2 chairs. The air smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. A female detective, her face a mask of bored skepticism, took her statement. "Sarah Jenkins, you're an RN at St. Jude's." "Yes, I've been for 6 years." "And you just happen to have a 14-gauge needle in your bag?" "It's a trauma kit," Sarah explained for the 10th time. "I've had it since my EMT certification. I keep it stocked. Any good ER nurse does." "A trauma kit, right." The detective wrote it down, her pen scratching loudly in the quiet room. "And you, with no medical license to practice in the field, decided to perform an invasive surgical procedure on a civilian." "It's not a surgical procedure. It's an emergency intervention. It's covered by Good Samaritan laws. She was in respiratory arrest. I saved her life." "That's not for you to determine, Ms. Jenkins. That's for the doctors at the hospital to determine." "I am a medical professional. I know a tension pneumothorax when I see one." "What you are," the detective said, leaning in, "is a person of interest in a high-level federal incident. You were found with a weapon, covered in the victim's blood. The victim, by the way, is the Secretary of State." Sarah's blood turned to ice. The Secretary of State? Eleanor Vance? Oh, God. She hadn't even recognized her. It made it all so much worse. This wasn't just a VIP. This was a cabinet member. I didn't know, she stammered. Doesn't matter. Your story is convenient. We'll hold you until we can verify it with the hospital and the victim. They left her there. For hours. The clock on the wall ticked. 10 p.m. 11 p.m. Midnight. Her body ached from the crash. The gash on her back was caked with dried blood. Her scrubs were stiff. She was exhausted, but the hard chair and the fluorescent lights made sleep impossible. She was trapped. At 2:30 a.m., the door opened. It was Officer Miller. His smirk was back. All right, nurse, you're free to go. For now. Sarah stumbled to her feet, her legs numb. You verified my story? We verified you're a nurse at St. Jude's, he said, unlocking her cuffs. Her wrists were raw. The secretary is in surgery. Nobody can talk to her. So as far as I'm concerned, you're still a person of interest. Don't leave town. He walked her to the exit. She stepped out into the humid night air, feeling violated. Her car was totaled, still on the highway. Her phone was dead. She had to use a payphone, a relic, to call for a cab. As she waited on the curb, shivering, Miller leaned out the door. Hey, Jenkins, next time, let the professionals handle it. He laughed and let the door swing shut. Sarah stood there, under the flickering streetlight, and for the first time in her career, she felt utterly, hopelessly broken. The cab ride to St. Jude's was a silent, blurry nightmare. Sarah wasn't going home. She needed to get checked out. Her back was on fire, and she was pretty sure she had a concussion. But more than that, she needed to be at the hospital. Her hospital. She needed to make sure her patient was okay. She needed to see friendly faces, to be in the one place in the world where she wasn't an assailant, but a damn good nurse. She paid the driver with the last 20 in her bag and pushed through the automatic doors of the emergency department. The familiar blast of antiseptic air and the frantic, controlled energy of the night shift usually calmed her. Tonight, it felt different. Maria, the night shift triage nurse, and her work wife was at the main desk. Maria, Sarah breathed, a wave of relief washing over her. Maria looked up. Her eyes went wide. She saw Sarah's bloody scrubs, her matted hair, the raw marks on her wrists. But her expression wasn't concern. It was fear. Sarah, what are you doing here? Maria's voice was a harsh whisper. She immediately looked over her shoulder, toward the doctor's station. Maria, I was in the crash, Sarah said, confused. The big one on the 395. The Secretary of State was my patient. I saved her. A cop arrested me. It was a whole thing. Is the Secretary okay? They brought her here, right? Sarah, you need to leave, Maria hissed, her eyes darting around. You can't be here. What? I need to get checked out. My back is… Dr. Thorne is on. He's furious. The entire administration is here. They're saying you attacked her. Attacked her? Maria, I saved her. I did a needle decompression. Jenkins! The voice was like a scalpel, cold, sharp, and sterile. Dr. Evan Thorne, the head of trauma surgery, was marching toward her. He was a tall man, immaculate in his designer scrubs, his silver hair perfectly in place even at 3 a.m. He was a brilliant surgeon and an insufferable egotist, a man who saw nurses as glorified servants. My office, now, he commanded. Dr. Thorne, I need to explain, Sarah started, following him. The patient was in respiratory arrest. Be silent, he swore. swept into his glass-walled office, not bothering to close the door. The entire ER staff was now openly staring. This wasn't a private conversation. It was a public execution. "What the hell did you do?" Thorne's voice was low and shaking with rage. "I have the Secret Service, the police, and hospital legal all crawling up my neck, and it all comes back to your name." "I did what I had to do," Sarah said, her own anger starting to rise. She had a tension pneumothorax, tracheal deviation, no breath sounds on the left. She was minutes from coding. I used a 14 gauge. I saved her life. Thorne actually laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound. "You saved nothing. You know what you did, Jenkins? You took a sterile, closed-chest injury and turned it into a septic, open wound. You punctured her lung, a lung that was probably just bruised, not collapsed, with a dirty needle you had in your purse. It was a sterile angiocath from a sealed package, and it was collapsed. I know the signs." "You don't know anything," he roared, slamming his hand on his desk. "You are a nurse. You do not cut, puncture, or intubate patients outside of this building. You especially do not perform a surgical procedure you're not qualified for in a ditch on the Secretary of State. Do you have any idea the liability you just exposed this hospital to? Any idea at all?" "There's a Good Samaritan law." "The Good Samaritan law protects civilians, Jenkins, not licensed medical professionals acting with gross negligence far outside their scope of practice. You could have waited for the paramedics." "She didn't have time. She was blue. She was dying." "That wasn't your call to make," he yelled. "Her physician is on a plane from Berlin. The president is monitoring her, and I had to be the one to tell them that their multi-billion-dollar protective detail was beaten by a rogue nurse with a needle fixation. I had to take her to the OR to clean up your mess." "Is she stable?" Sarah asked, the fight draining away, replaced only by a desperate need to know. Thorne straightened his scrubs, his face a mask of contempt. "She's stable. No thanks to you. I repaired the damage you did, and placed a proper chest tube. Now, get out of my ER." "But I'm injured. From the crash. My back." "Then you can check in through triage like any other civilian," Thorne sneered. "Because as of this moment, you are no longer my nurse." A cold pit opened in Sarah's stomach. "What?" "Ms. Jenkins." A new voice. A quiet, bureaucratic voice that was somehow more terrifying than Thorne's. Mr. Davies, the hospital administrator, was standing by the nurses' station. He was in a rumpled suit, flanked by a woman in a severe pantsuit holding a leather portfolio. Hospital, legal. "Mr. Davies," Sarah said, her voice small. "Ms. Jenkins, please come with me," he said. Not unkindly, but it wasn't a request. He led her to the penthouse, the administrative wing. The lights were dim, the carpets plush. It was a world, away from the controlled chaos of the ER. They entered a large, dark wood boardroom. "Sarah," Mr. Davies began, steepling his fingers, "we have a very serious situation. We have the police report from Officer Miller, which states you were hysterical and interfered with first responders. We have Dr. Thorne's medical opinion that your actions were reckless, unnecessary, and created a massive infection risk." "That's not true," Sarah whispered. "Officer Miller, he—" "We also," the lawyer cut in, her voice flat, "have a dozen cell phone videos of you being arrested while holding what appears to be a weapon over the secretary. The media is already picking it up. Unstable nurse attacks Secretary of State's motorcade." Sarah's head snapped up. "No, that's not what happened. I shielded her. A second car hit us. That's why I was on top of her." Mr. Davies held up a hand. "The optics, Sarah, are indefensible, and your actions, regardless of your intent, were a flagrant violation of hospital policy and your scope of practice. You acted as a physician. You are not one." "I acted as a human being," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "You acted as a liability," the lawyer said. Mr. Davies sighed. "Sarah, you know how much we value you, but our hands are tied. Pending a full board review and an investigation by the State Nursing Board, we are placing you on indefinite, unpaid suspension." "Suspension?" "We'll need your badge and your locker keys," the lawyer said, sliding a small manila envelope across the polished table. It was clinical. It was fast. There was no emotion. Sarah, numb, unclipped her badge, the one with her smiling picture, the one that said Sarah Jenkins, RN, BSN, the one she had worked her entire life to earn. She dropped it on the table. The plastic clack was the loudest sound she'd ever heard. "A security guard will escort you to your locker and then off the premises," Davies said. He wouldn't meet her eyes. The guard was a kind man named Frank, who often shared his donuts with her on the night shift. Tonight, he looked miserable. "Sorry, Sarah," he mumbled. She cleaned out her locker, her favorite stethoscope, a picture of her and Maria at the Christmas party, a spare pair of sneakers. She stuffed it all into her bag. Frank walked her through the ER. Everyone was watching. Dr. Thorne was back at the nurses' station, writing charts, a small, victorious smirk on his face. Maria was busy with a patient, her back pointedly turned. Sarah was escorted out the same doors she had run through hours earlier, believing she was coming home. The automatic doors slid shut behind her. She was alone. She was suspended. Her career was over. She found her way back to her small, empty apartment. She turned on the TV. There it was, her face, a grainy cell phone shot, her hair wild, her eyes wide with terror as Miller cuffed her. The Chiron read, "Hospital suspends nurse involved in Vance crash." The reporter's voice was grim. "An unstable nurse, identified as Sarah Jenkins, who allegedly interfered with the scene, stabbing the secretary with an unknown object before being subdued by police. The hospital has suspended her, pending an investigation into her fitness for duty." Sarah sank to the floor. They had all done it. Miller, Thorne, Davies, the media. They had taken her single greatest act of heroism and twisted it into a crime. She wasn't just fired. She was a villain. She was the unstable nurse. She was a pariah. She covered her face, and for the first time since the crash, she wept. The VIP wing of St. Jude's was a different hospital entirely. It had carpets, recessed lighting, and a private nursing staff. Inside the largest suite, Secretary of State Eleanor Vance was awake. She was pale, her arm in a sling, and a thick bandage covered the side of her head. A chest tube, the permanent one Dr. Thorne had placed, snaked out from under her hospital gown, bubbling quietly in the drainage canister beside her bed. Her personal physician, who had flown in from Berlin, was conferring with Dr. Thorne. The head of her Secret Service detail stood grim-faced in the corner. "As you can see, Doctor," Thorne was saying, his voice smooth and professional, "the initial trauma was significant, but we were able to stabilize her in the OR. The field contamination was our main concern, but we've got her on a powerful, broad-spectrum antibiotic. It was a close call. You're very lucky the EMTs got to you when they did, Madam Secretary." Secretary Vance, who had been listening with her eyes closed, opened them. They were not the eyes of a groggy patient. They were sharp, analytical, and cold. "It wasn't the EMTs," she said. Her voice was hoarse, but it held the same power that silenced ambassadors. Dr. Thorne paused, a polite smile on his face. I'm sorry, Madam Secretary. It wasn't the EMTs who got to me first, Vance repeated. It was a woman, a nurse. She was in the car behind me. Thorne's smile tightened. Ah, yes. Ms. Jenkins. A troubled member of our staff. We're aware of her interference. I'm just grateful her reckless actions didn't cost you your life. Reckless? Vance pushed herself up on one elbow, wincing. Doctor, I was there. I remember everything. I remember choking. I remember not being able to breathe. And I remember a second crash, a car spinning at us. She looked at the head of her Secret Service detail. Agent Foster, you were there. Tell him. Agent Foster, who had been silent, stepped forward. It's true, sir. I was dazed, but I saw it. The second car. It was coming right for the opening. The nurse, Jenkins, she threw herself over the secretary. She took the impact. The glass. It's why the secretary has no facial lacerations. The nurse shielded her. Thorne's face went blank. This was not in the report. And then, Vance continued, her voice gaining strength, she looked at me. I was dying. I know the feeling. She said, "This will hurt. But you need to breathe." And she used that needle. She saved my life. Madam Secretary, Thorne sputtered, that is a medical impossibility. She's a nurse. She wouldn't have the diagnostic skill. The procedure she performed was dangerous. The procedure she performed, Vance cut in, her voice like ice, was the only reason I am alive to have this conversation with you. I heard the air. I felt my lung reinflate. I was a combat reporter in my 20s, Doctor. I've seen that wound before, and I've seen it kill people. She saved my life. Vance turned back to Agent Foster. And what happened to her? I saw the police. I saw them pull her off me. Agent Foster looked down, ashamed. The responding officer, ma'am, a local cop named Miller, he misinterpreted the scene. He detained her. He cuffed her. He what? He arrested her, Madam Secretary. Believed she was the attacker. And the hospital? Vance asked, her eyes finding Thorne's. This troubled nurse, the one who shielded me with her body and saved my life. What has been her reward for this? Dr. Thorne suddenly found the floor fascinating. She was acting outside her scope of practice. There were liability concerns. She has been suspended, pending review. There was a long, terrible silence in the expensive room. Secretary Vance stared at Dr. Thorne, her expression unreadable. So, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. Let me summarize. A heroic nurse from your hospital saved me from a second impact with her own body. Then she performed a life-saving, in-the-field emergency procedure. And for this, she was arrested by a fool, slandered by her superior, and fired by her hospital. Suspended, Thorne corrected weakly. Get out, Vance said. Madam Secretary. Get out of my room and send in my chief of staff. Thorne, his face bright red, turned and fled. Vance looked at her chief of staff, a woman who had been with her for 20 years. Clara, I was saved by a hero, and the system just tried to crucify her. I will not let that stand. Get me a secure line. To who, Eleanor? To the only person who can fix this. Secretary Vance's eyes hardened. Get the president on the line. The next morning, Sarah was still in her apartment. She was sitting in the dark, her phone on the counter, buzzing with calls from unknown numbers. Reporters, no doubt. She hadn't slept. She was a ghost in her own life. Then, a knock. Not a buzz from the intercom, but a hard, official pound on her apartment door. Her heart leapt into her throat. It's Miller. He's here to arrest me for real. The state board must have revoked my license. It's over." She crept to the door, her hands shaking. She looked through the peephole. Her blood ran even colder. Not Officer Miller. Two men. Two tall, grim-faced men in identical dark suits, white shirts, and dark ties. They wore earpieces. Secret Service. She opened the door, her knees weak. "Sarah Jenkins?" the taller one asked. His voice was flat, emotionless. Yes? We need you to come with us, ma'am." Am I under arrest?" she whispered. The agent's expression softened, just slightly. "No, ma'am. You are not in any trouble, but we do need you to come with us. Right now." She was in a daze. She grabbed her keys and her purse, her mind blank with terror and confusion. They didn't cuff her. They flanked her, one in front, one behind, as they walked to a black, glistening Suburban parked at the curb. The ride was silent. They didn't take her to a precinct. They drove her past the city limits to a private airfield. They drove onto the tarmac, right up to a sleek, white C-20 Gulfstream jet with a small American flag on the tail. "Ma'am," the agent said, opening her door. 20 minutes later, she was in the air, sipping a bottle of water she didn't remember being given, watching the Virginia countryside blur into green patchwork thousands of feet below. They landed at Andrews Air Force Base. Another black car. This time, they drove into the heart of D.C. They passed monuments, barricades, and checkpoints. They drove right up to the South Lawn. They were at the White House. I don't understand," Sarah said, as the agent opened her door. "He's waiting for you, ma'am." She was walked through hallways she had only ever seen on television. Past the portraits of first ladies, past Marines who stood at impossibly perfect attention. She was ushered toward two massive, ornate doors. An aide opened them. She stepped inside. The room was oval. The light from the garden streamed in. And there, standing behind the resolute desk, was the President of the United States. He was smiling. Sitting in a chair to the side, looking pale but powerful in a pantsuit and a sling, was Secretary Eleanor Vance. "Ms. Jenkins," the President said, walking around the desk, his hand outstretched. "I'm so glad you could make it. I've heard a lot about you." Sarah, numb, shook his hand. "Mr. President." "Please call him sir," Secretary Vance said, her voice warm. "Sarah, it's so good to see you when I'm nodding." "Madam Secretary," Sarah breathed. You're okay." "I'm okay because of you," Vance said. "You saved my life, and I heard how they treated you." Her expression hardened. "That is not how we treat our heroes in this country." The President nodded, his face turning serious. "I've spent my morning making some phone calls, Sarah. I thought you'd like to know the results." He picked up a piece of paper from his desk. "First, Officer Miller, I had a long chat with the governor of Virginia. It seems Officer Miller's conduct and a few other misinterpretations in his file have earned him an immediate and permanent reassignment to a desk, in the records room, in a basement, effective immediately." Sarah felt a small, sharp jolt of satisfaction. "Second, Dr. Evan Thorne," the President continued. "I had the head of the American Medical Association reach out to him personally. They reminded him about the ethical and legal force of Good Samaritan laws and about the impropriety of slandering a colleague to superiors. He's facing a formal censure from the board at St. Jude's." Sarah's breath hitched. "And finally," the President said, "Mr. Davies, the hospital administrator. He called me personally, gushing with apologies. He wants me to convey that your suspension was a terrible misunderstanding. He's very eager to offer you your job back." The president smiled. "In fact, he's offering you a promotion to head nurse of the ER, and a 30% raise, effective immediately." It was all there. Vindication. Justice. Everything she wanted. She was a hero. She had her job back. Her name was cleared. "Thank you, Mr. President," Sarah said, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you, Madam Secretary. I don't know what to say." "Don't thank us," the president said. "And you don't have to accept Mr. Davies's offer." Sarah looked up, confused. "Sir?" "You're right," Secretary Vance said, standing up and walking over. "We don't treat our heroes that way. We promote them. Sarah, you're the kind of person we need. Calm under pressure, resourceful, brave. The kind of person who runs toward the fire." The president put his hand on her shoulder. "We're putting together a new federal task force, a joint initiative between FEMA and Health and Human Services. It's designed to train and embed elite medical responders within civilian emergency services, so there's always someone on the scene who knows what a tension pneumothorax is." Sarah looked between them, her heart pounding. "It's going to need a director of training," the president said. "Someone with field experience, someone with grit, someone who isn't afraid to act." Secretary Vance smiled. "We want you to help lead it, Sarah, from right here, in Washington." Sarah looked at the President of the United States. She looked at the Secretary of State, whose life she had saved. She thought of the crash, the cuffs, the humiliation, and the despair, and she realized it wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. She stood up straight, her back no longer aching, her voice clear and strong for the first time in 36 hours. "Sir," she said, extending her hand, "I accept.